Hey everyone, welcome to the 2025 Daytona 24 Hours. We're here joined by Jochen Neerpasch, the founder of BMW M and Motorsport, and today we're going to be talking all about that. First of all, welcome to America, or welcome back to America. You've been here in the past as a driver, then as the head of BMW Motorsport, and of course as a guest in the last few years as well. So let's start first with that. What's your memory of your first race here in 1968 when you actually won the Daytona 24 Hours? Any interesting stories from that race?
This is a very difficult story because in December 1967 we had a 24-hour test here at Daytona with a Porsche factory team, and I had a big crash in one of the bankings, and I broke my 7th vertebrae. This was 1 month before the race started. So they put me in a cast from here to here, and for 4 weeks I couldn't sleep, so I was a very low physical fitness. And I think 10 days before the race they took it off, and I came here, and it was very difficult for me to start the race, to start the practice, because in the banking where I had the crash I was very nervous. But after, let's say, after half a day I was okay, and it was so good for me then to finish the first race after the accident as a P1. This was a fantastic result for me.
Amazing. And then you went from racing through different roles as an executive for different companies. Then you ended at BMW M and Motorsport, where you founded the division. But then you came back here in 1975, where for the first time you are racing in the US. What do you remember from that time?
Yeah, this was an adventure for us because it was a short decision. In Europe we did have the energy crisis. We did win all the championships the year before, and then suddenly it was not useful to go racing in Europe because we were not allowed to drive on Sundays, and so we decided to go to America. But of course we didn't have any knowledge of American racing. The only thing we did know is we were competing with the Porsche 911s in European Championships, and we did know we are competitive with the Porsches, so we took the risk and came over. So the first race was here, and it was our first proof whether we are competitive or not. In practice it was quite well, but in the race, I think it was at midnight, both cars didn't finish. We had an engine problem because there was water in the petrol, and this was it. But we were sure that we were competitive, and this was our main, let's say, importance. And already the second race we had a good result.
Interesting. So 1972, you founded BMW M and Motorsport. How were the times back then? Like when you went to the board and told them, hey, I want to found this division and we want to go racing. How did these discussions go about?
The story is a little bit different because I was competitions manager at Ford, and in Cologne we did beat the BMW coupes, and I got a phone call, I think it was in January 1972, from Bob Lutz, and he asked me, BMW wants to reorganize their motorsport activities, if I could be interested in this. I had no reason to change because at Ford we were very competitive, and therefore I did ask to form an own company in Munich, an own company not only to go racing but also to build high performance activities and combine the, let's say, the knowledge of racing with a high performance market. And I got an okay from this, and this was our start. Of course, when I came to Munich, it was in May 1972, we started with 5 people. So this was a very difficult
big change
situation.
from.
And the first year in 1972, we were busy to build the 1000 CSL coupes at Karmann. At the same time, we had developed the racing CSL coupes, and we had to produce cars. And the year later, in our first activity in 1973, we could win already the European Championship races. And this was a very, let's say, impressive situation.
Sure. Any interesting stories with Bob Lutz? You mentioned Bob is an icon in the US, clearly, probably for the BMW brand overall. Do you have any interesting stories with Bob for the first time you met him or the first time you went racing here?
He was a racer himself. He was very dynamic. And I mean, before Alpina did try to get a homologation with the 3.0 coupes, and we are never able to do it. And Bob Lutz took the risk because you had to build 1,000 lightweight cars and to sell them as well. And he took the risk, and he was very successful with it because after winning races, we could sell the cars very well.
So this is a question from Steve Saxty, which he said I should ask you about the state of the program that you inherited with the F2 program and the rallying program when you came to BMW. Is there a story there?
The rally program, of course, there was a small rally department, was in 2002. We continued with this, and we had, for example, Jean Todt as a co-driver and Achim Baumwold as a driver, and the only European Championship rally we did win was the Austrian Alpine Rally. But then when we changed to the 3 Series cars, the decision was to stop rallying but to go racing. And our first season, as I said before, we started with the development of the 3.0 CSL. But parallel to this, we did build Formula 2 engines. At that time, you did have to homologate engines with 1,000 four-cylinder, 4 valve cylinder heads. We were successful with this, and we sold. I think we took the risk because we could sell 50 engines, 50 engines to March, and therefore we could start with it. And from there on, I think we did win 7 times the European Championship. This was an activity, let's say, customer motorsport. We did not pay for this championship. We sold the engines, and this was a very successful activity.
Interesting. So another question, now we always go back to the M1, such an iconic car, and it's still the only BMW supercar that was ever made so many decades later. Why did the project go to Lamborghini at that time?
At that time, the production facilities were not as flexible as they are today. For example, the 3.0 CSL we could not build on the BMW production line. We had to go to Carmine, and they did build the cars. And when we started with our M1 project, we did look for a location where we could produce small numbers of high-performance cars. And at that time, Lamborghini was a company with a, let's say, organization ready to build 800 high-performance cars per year with a production facility, but they were only able to build 400 of its own because the sales went down, so they had a free capacity. So we made a contract with them because they had the knowledge of small production producing, and we started very successful as a company. We did the whole development, including the first 7 prototypes at Lamborghini. But when we started with the production, it came out that Lamborghini were more or less unable, financially in trouble. So we had to stop the contract, and then a very difficult production situation happened because we had to build the bodies at Ital Design in Turin, the frame in Bologna, and the assembly of the complete car at Bauer in Stuttgart. So this was a very complicated situation, and we could not produce the 400 cars for homologation within 1 year. This was the main problem, and because of this, we finally ended up with the Procar series.
There is a legend that I read in the book also that you went to Lamborghini and literally took one of the prototypes out and brought it back with you. Is that a legend or it's true?
No, it's true. When we found out that Lamborghini is bankrupt, we had a problem because all the prototypes and the tools were there, but we had a very cooperative situation with the engineers, and the engineers left some Lamborghini, and I think it was we came there with the transporters, and at night time we took all the I took them out.
So that was the Italian job.
Yeah, it was an Italian job. So this was. But it worked.
It worked. Yeah. Very interesting.
Without any problem.
Exactly. So then you went from the M1 clearly to racing with the M1 Procar. What's the story there? I mean, it was told before, but maybe there is something else that hasn't been told before. How did you go? How did you convince the board basically, hey, now we have to go racing with this car as well because we need to homologate it and all of that? Was it complicated for those times?
Of course. I mean, we had 1 year without racing because homologation was not there. And I remember very well, Max Mosley at that time, we had a very close connection with him. He was one of the founders of the March company, and he did run the Formula 2 activities. We had a very nice evening in a bar in Munich, and we started to discuss what can we do with it, because a manufacturer series, there are many, so we have to have something very special. And then we thought, after we had the second or third whiskey, we do a race series together with the Formula 1 drivers. And next morning we thought, okay, this was not a bad idea. We contacted Bernie, and he found it's a very good idea, because on Saturday at Formula 1 there were no spectators, and if we could have a situation with a production car and integrate the Formula 1 drivers with the best European GT drivers, could work. So he was in favor of the series, and then we started with a project, but it was very, very difficult, because we had only, I think, half a year or maybe a little bit more time to produce the cars, to do the development with the cars, and to sell more than 20 cars to customers, with the condition that they had to start at the Procar race. And most of the people did not believe that it will happen, because the Formula 1 drivers in a car like this, and it was a very difficult situation until the first race in Zolder. Part of the Formula 1 drivers, they'd say, okay, we drive, but part of them said, no, we never drive. And one of the drivers who rejected to drive was Mario Andretti. And Max was there. Bernie said, give them cash money, then they will drive. And Max Mosley had a box with money, and he went to Mario, and one after the other, and then Mario said, okay, I drive. And then all the others did drive. And finally, I mean, it ended up, Friday practice was important. The best 5 of the Friday practice were allowed to drive a Procar. And for the Formula 1 drivers, Friday practice was very important, because they wanted to drive.
How different times from today, Formula 1 and racing and all of that. So not only you founded a company, also the first supercar, but there are also quite other few achievements that you've had in your career. One of them, clearly the BMW logo behind you. Second one, the BMW Junior Team. So maybe let's start with the Junior Team. I know you're quite proud of that, but tell me also, what was your thinking back then when you said we have to develop these drivers and we need to found this academy? How difficult was that also to push through in BMW, because it was unheard of at that time? And I know that you put in place a lot of things like around physical training and all of that was not available at that time for drivers.
Yeah, this was for me the most important thing. When I stopped racing after I had the accident here in Daytona, I did realize myself how important it is to be fit enough for racing. So the first thing we did at BMW, physical fitness training with the drivers, and we went to a service in St. Moritz in wintertime for, I think, 3 weeks before the season to train the drivers. And coming to the junior team, it was not only, let's say, to help young drivers to be professional race drivers. At that time, we had the situation that the 3 Series came new on the market. And after the 2002, which was a very sporty car, the 3 Series was not accepted as a sporty car as well as the 2002. And at that time, I was member of a meeting, in a marketing meeting. And when we heard this, I said, okay, we go race into the 3 Series car, then we helped to get the sporty image. So we, in very short time, we developed the 3 Series Group 5 car. We could do this because we could use a number of, let's say, technical details from the CSL Group A. So in short time, the car was ready. And at that time, we had 2 divisions. Division 1, more than 2,000 CCM, which was a CSL was the overall classement, and the Division 2 was up to 2,000, and the competition only was a Ford, and with the Alfa Romeos for us was not enough. So we thought we developed a program, a junior program, with the 3 very young drivers on one side, and we put them in the factory cars, and our senior drivers, Hans Stuck and Ronnie Peterson and David Hobbs, we put them in the tuner car. So we had a competition between the juniors and the seniors as well with the Ford Escorts and with the. So this was a fantastic story. And the first year, the Division 2 was more important for the public than the Division 1. So this worked very well.
And what were you thinking then with the physical training? Why did you think that was needed, back in the 70s, that you have to have this physical training for the drivers and to prepare them physically also, not just to go to race the car? How did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, because I felt it myself as a professional driver, how important it is. Because I had a problem, for example, if the weather was bad, if it was raining, I got headaches, and nobody could help me to overcome this. And at that time, my performance was less good. So this was the reason why we started. When I went to the management, we started to help the drivers to be in physical conditions, but also not only this. With a junior team, we teach them on the technical side as well. Also with the development of the cars, they were included to get the technical understanding as well. This was part of the junior program.
Who's the most impressive driver that you've met through the junior academy?
Let's say the most impressive driver in the whole area for me was Ronnie Peters. He was a fantastic personality as well, and he was fast and But as a junior drivers, I mean, we had our junior team now, our new junior team was drivers are racing here was Neil Verhagen and Dan Harper and Max Hesse. When they started, they were 18 years old and 3 completely different personalities. And we took them together at Formula Medicine in Italy to have a 2 months physical fitness training. So already they did know each other. And then we put them in Nürburgring Nordschleife, which is one of the most difficult circuits in the world. They did live there together in an apartment for 3 years and did the whole series on Nürburgring. They started with an M2 to get the license for Nürburgring. The next step was GT4, and they did win the 24-hour race, the GT4 class, and the next step then was GT3. So they developed, let's say, as a group, as a team, over 3 years from a very low class to a very high class. And the main importance is they did know each other, and at long distance races the drivers need to be, let's say, they need to work as a team. If you put 3 Formula 1 drivers in a GT car, before they get themselves organized, it's very, very difficult. And they learned to cooperate, and you see the result here. They are 23 years old now, and they are competing with the best GT drivers in the world.
I'm going to go back to this one. How did you come up with this idea? I keep asking this because it's so obvious today, but when we look at the BMW R Car Today project, it makes sense, right? Like today, they're so cool. Everybody loves the BMW R Car projects. But once again, decades ago, how did you come up with the idea of working with Roy Lichtenstein and all these guys? Because it was unheard of again, in the industry. So what's the story there?
It happened by accident as well. We were here in the States. This was a time when we could not race in Europe. We wanted, of course, always to go to Le Mans, but it did make sense to go to Le Mans to win Le Mans. And I got a phone call from Jean Todt. I think it was in January at that time. And he told me there's an art dealer in Paris, Hervé Paulin, and he has a project which he asked Alpine, I think it was, to drive himself an Alpine at the 24-hour races, at the 24-hour race in Le Mans. And he had an artist, a painter, who could paint the car, and they rejected the program. And I thought this could be a very good idea to go to Le Mans, not as a motorsport event, but as an art event. And we liked the idea, and then it happened. The problem was our team was here in the States, and we didn't have enough people to prepare a car for Le Mans. But finally, I mean, if you want to do it, you'll find always ways to do it, and it happened. And after the first year, we were so happy with the project that we continued. And the idea was different than the art cars after Le Mans. The idea was to have the artist connected with the event, not only with the car, with the event was the most important 24-hour race in Le Mans. So if you look at the cars, if you look at the Roy Lichtenstein car, for example, he has the road and the sun coming up, so he has the whole project, not a high-performance car racing in Le Mans. This was the idea. And all the artists, they didn't take money. So they just were interested to do this, and they were all at the racetrack as well, so this was fantastic.
Fantastic idea. I mean, even today, you look at the art cars, it's unheard of for any other brand. It's so unique. I saw the last one too with Julie.
But of course, when we started, we could not see that it was this successful, but it was
It worked out,
yeah.
yeah. So now, speaking of other things that you invented, the BMW M logo and colors. Today, brands spend millions, tens of millions of dollars to come up with a logo. They go through a million agencies. How was it back then? Because the story of the colors and the logo, it's always a dual story. But let's set the record straight for once. How did you come up with the logo and the colors for the M brand?
It was first the design of the car was the stripes. At that time, we had the Olympic Games in Munich, and they used a color system for the Olympic Games, and we thought it's a very nice idea. They used, of course, different colors than we had. At that time, we were in contact with Texaco for a promotion contract, and they have red as their main color. So we tried to combine the BMW white and blue and the red, and therefore we made this stripes with blue, two blues and red, and then we made the stripe design for the car. And finally, the contract was Texaco. It did not happen, but we liked the cars, the color so much that we continued with this. I mean, the design of the car, at that time, the design of department of BMW was not so big. So the design of the car was done by a friend of us in Munich, an artist. So at that time, it was possible to do this. Yeah.
Very different. Now, if we switch a little bit to regular cars, road cars, what were some of the guiding philosophies and principles that you had when you first developed M cars in the early days of the company?
First of all, the main idea to form an own company at that time, before I was competition manager for Ford, which was a department within the company, and the only thing was to do racing. And at that time, the tuning of cars was very popular, and I thought we have to combine the racing with the high performance sector, and this was the reason why we formed an own company and to get a connect. Yeah. Also, I mean, the race drivers, they didn't want to drive for their personal cars, normal cars, so they wanted to have tuning cars. So it started the whole idea like this: racing and high performance, the same experience for the whole area.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. You've witnessed the evolution of racing over the last decades. Again, how do you feel like it has changed? Has it changed for good, for worse? Is it less engaging today to race, more technical, less fun?
It's a completely different world. When I was racing, for example, the cars were, let's say, not so solid like today. Porsche did make a statement: the best car is which retires 5 meters after the finish, not retires with brakes. So the cars were like, we had no rev limiter. Once you had a wrong gear, then the engine was broken. And it was much more for the driver, the challenge for the driver, to finish the race than to win the race. So you had to, it was much more difficult racing than today. Today, I mean, you run a whole season with the same engine. At the time when I raced, you had to change the engine before the race because they didn't hold for the whole distance. So this was a completely different type of racing. But nowadays, the cars are technically so high, on such a high level that, let's say, the racing itself for the driver, let's say the technical side is more developed and the driver has less work on holding the car on the road. But he has, of course, much more to coordinate the technical system. So it's a different kind of racing. And the other thing, we have balance of performance racing now. The advantage is that you end up with a 24-hour races within few seconds, the first 3 or 4 or 5 cars. The time when I was racing between here in Daytona, we were first, and 5 laps later was second, and 10 laps later, and the competition is much more impressive nowadays.
It's closer. Very interesting. What achievement are you most proud of during your time at BMW?
Oh, I can't say this. I mean, first,
There's so many. I know it's picking your favorite child. We always talk about that with Tom. It's not easy, you know, when you ask that question. But if there is one that you say, this is my legacy, which one would it be?
I mean, I did my job one after the other. And for me, it was always important after the race is before the race. So I never did think what was best in the past. The achievement, I really think it is, we started as the first, let's say, to develop, to help the drivers to develop as race drivers. I think this was one of my main importance. Because at that time, I remember there was a race in Formula One race. At Saturday night, they had parties. They drove at Sundays. Physical fitness was not used. After I had the accident here in Daytona, I went to my doctor at home and said, what can I do to get a better performance? Because I want to race a 24-hour race. And then he said, a race driver has not to work because the engine is he has only to brake. And it was a completely different understanding. We started with this area, and nowadays, I mean, all of the...
Everybody's got a personal trainer and traveling with them everywhere, basically.
I think this was the beginning of the understanding that this is necessary.
Sure, definitely. Now, are there any decisions or things that you would have done differently during your time with BMW? Something that you're thinking now, I would have done this differently now if I could.
Well, maybe that I left BMW in 69.
That's a fair one. You could have done a lot more there. You've done a lot in a very short period of time. This is very, very interesting. I'm going to finish with two fun questions. Once again from Steve, one of them. He told me to ask you, why did you leave now, because you mentioned leaving and joining Talbot and taking the F1 engine with you?
I didn't take an F1 engine with me.
Okay.
I changed to Talbot because I wanted to enter Formula One as a manager. And when I came to, of course, at BMW, I tried always to have the engine, the turbo engine for Formula One, but it was rejected. There was a very clear board decision, no Formula One for BMW. So because the engine was on such a high level, we developed the engine not as a Formula One engine, but as a saloon car engine. Here in America was McLaren engines. And I did know that this engine is working in Formula One. So when I went to Talbot, they wanted to use the 12-cylinder engine and not state-of-the-art engine. And it took me a lot of discussion that Talbot finally agreed the system to buy the BMW engine, call it Talbot, and go Formula One racing. Because Talbot was not interested in a high-performance image. They were interested to use the name Talbot, which has a history in motorsport. So we finally got a solution from Talbot to use and try to buy the engine from BMW. And then we had a meeting with Mr. von Kuhnheim and Mr. Schönbeck, and we had let's say, a contract, a pre-contract, how do you say, a letter of intent.
Oh, a letter of intent,
letter of
yes.
intent, that Talbot buys the engine, BMW calls it Talbot, and BMW does the service at the racetrack. Similar like it happened later with Stock and Porsche. So we had a lot of contact, and when Mr. von Kuhnheim and Schönbeck came back to Munich, there was a revolt, because the engineer said never that BMW gives his know-how to another company. So the project was stopped, and then suddenly BMW realized that the engine is good for Formula One. And then BMW went with the engine very successful in Formula One, and I was out.
Well, thank you so much for all the details. Really appreciate it. Very informative stories and very, very interesting. And hopefully you're having a great weekend here, and hopefully the car wins once again. And thank you once again for taking the time.